USAID fight is one that signifies the divide between the activist left, who've wielded just enormous power, disproportionate power, and pretty much the rest of the country. We'll get to how USAID was complicit in creating the false narratives behind Trump's impeachment. But first, the Vatican just overnight took aim at the Trump administration. A cardinal closely aligned to Pope Francis urged the administration to remember Christian principles about caring for others, while a Vatican charity put out a statement claiming that millions of people could die as a result of the, and I quote here, ruthless US decision to recklessly stop USAID funding. Josh, how is stopping funding for the following, and I'm going to just list some items here, going to kill millions? We've got taxpayers' money, 45 million of it going to DEI scholarships in Burma, 7.9 million to teach Sri Lankan journalists how to avoid binary gendered language, 4.5 million to combat disinformation in Kazakhstan, 2 million for sex changes and LGBT activism in Guatemala, 2.1 million to help the BBC value the diversity of Libyan society, 10 million worth of USAID funded meals went to Al-Qaeda, a terrorist group, or it went to a Al-Qaeda linked terrorist group, 5 million to EcoHealth Alliance, one of the key NGOs funding bat virus research in that Wuhan lab. We've got money going to Armenian LGBT groups, money going to LGBT advocacy in Jamaica, 2 million to promote LGBT equity in Latin America, 5.5 million for LGBT activism in Uganda. There's a theme emerging there, Josh.
Yeah, Rita, I give you a lot of credit for reading through that entire list and somehow not just bursting out into laughter, because that would have been my temptation if I were in your position there. Unfortunately, the one who is not laughing is the American taxpayer, who has been subsidizing all of this stupid crap for the better part of 6+ decades. I mean, John F. Kennedy established USAID via executive order in 1961 as a tool of soft power diplomacy at the height of the Cold War. This was the era of the Cuban Missile Crisis and mutually assured destruction there. It was one tool in the American arsenal to try to stop the expansion, the metastasis of the Soviet Union. But the Soviet Union has not existed literally in my lifetime here. And at this point, USAID has been so wildly co-opted by far left gender ideologues and racial identitarians there. Who does the Vatican think they are, frankly, to get on their moral high horse and try to tell us what we can and cannot trim out of our federal budget? They have no right whatsoever to meddle in our own internal affairs when it comes to how we manage our budget here. And for their purposes, they're probably most concerned, if I'm being very charitable, I would imagine they're most concerned about some of the actual rarer good things that USAID does when it comes to, for instance, stopping the spread of Ebola and HIV and AIDS in Africa there. But the point, Rita, that will continue. It will just get subsumed into the U.S. State Department. This is really just bureaucratic streamlining, and it all redounds to the benefit of the U.S. taxpayer. The Vatican has no business whatsoever freaking ever meddling in our affairs. I would kindly suggest, actually, that they get their own house in order, stop putting baby Jesus in a bunch of Palestinian kafiyas. That might give them a little bit more of a moral high ground here to tell us whether or not we can stop subsidizing al-Qaeda militants, as we just saw on the screen.
And the hypocrisy there as well. Whenever they're weighing on these issues, you look at how the Vatican itself operates, the security, the walls, the wealth, and perhaps keep those lectures to yourself. Now, tell me about the manner in which USAID was involved in the impeachment of Donald Trump in 2019. Investigative journalist Michael Schellenberger has done some remarkable work uncovering the links here. Tell my audience what the involvement of USAID and that CIA analyst was in the Trump impeachment.
So the 2019 Trump impeachment, it's hard to keep track of all this. I mean, we've had all these prosecutions, and then the second impeachment was a January 6th impeachment that really stole a lot of the headlines. But the 2019 impeachment was the one that involved this fairly brief phone call with Vladimir Zelensky. Trump famously described that as a perfect phone call. It was a fairly brief phone call. If you printed out a transcript there, it was roughly 5 or 6 pages long. The entire country of Ukraine, Rita, in the aftermath of the Maidan Revolution in 2014, became something of a playground for Western NGOs, for Western liberal Hillary Clinton, George Soros adjacent non-governmental organizations there. And in the aftermath of the Cold War, I was kind of just explaining how the USAID lost its reason for existing after the Cold War. It got totally co-opted by this constellation of left-wing NGOs, and a lot of those NGOs were involved there on the ground in Ukraine, ultimately leading to the bogus impeachment of Donald Trump for this Zelensky phone call in 2019. By the way, it's worth remembering that actual impeachment in response to this phone call, what Donald Trump was doing was he was threatening to withhold aid to Ukraine to make sure that they got their investigation in order of Hunter Biden and Burisma. So fast forward actually 6 years later, and we've seen a lot more details, by the way, about Hunter Biden and Burisma, thanks to the Miranda Devine, a laptop from hell, the New York Post, that whole story there. It turns out that Donald Trump was actually totally correct in 2019 to try to limit foreign aid to Ukraine in response to their shenanigans with respect to Hunter Biden.
Now, President Trump has made it clear that his patience with Hamas is running out after they released 3 hostages who'd obviously suffered terrible abuse, been starved. Here is what the president had to say about that.
When I see that scene that I saw today with people coming out of helicopters and airplanes that are emaciated, that look like they haven't had a meal in a month, there's no reason for that, and I don't know how much longer we can take it.
Do you mean you want to recast?
I don't know how long we can take it. When I watch people that were healthy people a reasonably short number of years ago, and you look at them today, they look like they've aged 25 years. They literally look like the old pictures of Holocaust survivors. The same thing. I mean, the same thing. And I don't know how long we're going to take that.
Powerful words there. And earlier today, President Trump gave Hamas a deadline to release all the hostages or the ceasefire would end.
As far as I'm concerned, if all of the hostages aren't returned by Saturday at 12 o'clock, I think it's an appropriate time. I would say cancel it and all bets are off and let hell break out. I'd say they ought to be returned by 12 o'clock on Saturday, and if they're not returned, all of them, not in drips and drabs.
Josh, how do you see this progressing? Is the ceasefire in danger of coming to an end on Saturday?
Well, it seems like the answer to that question, Rita, is yes, unless Hamas somehow produces all of the remaining hostages, which, if I know anything about Hamas whatsoever, I am quite skeptical that they are going to abide by Donald Trump's demands here. What is that going to mean in concrete terms? I mean, that's kind of the $1 million question that I have after seeing that clip. I'm not entirely sure that Donald Trump is threatening direct military action in Gaza there. Rather, I think that he would simply be encouraging Israel and the IDF to basically to go in and to double down on their efforts. It's worth recalling, Rita, that the IDF, which, by the way, has achieved the most moral and just civilian to combatant death ratio in the history of urban warfare. But one of the reasons that they have been hamstringing their own soldiers so much when it comes to the rules of engagement was back during the Biden administration, which was constantly threatening them and accusing them of possibly committing genocide or things like this there. But if Donald Trump is saying, all hell is going to break loose, do what you have to do, you're going to get a more unrestrained, a less restrained Israel Defense Forces. That really ought to be very bad news for Hamas at this point there. It seems like Donald Trump has really taken these absolutely appalling Auschwitz-esque images of these freed hostages to heart there. And good for him. Frankly, it seems like Netanyahu's trip to D.C. last week really paid off in spades.
And it wasn't just the condition of the hostages, Josh, it was the psychological torture they were subjected to. One of the hostages, Eli Sharabi, was asked what he was looking forward to, that sham crazy scenes that Hamas had created where they're interviewing them, making them hold up certificates. And he said he was looking forward to seeing his family, his wife and daughters. He didn't know, Josh, that Hamas had already murdered them. That just shows you the depravity and the cruelty of this terror group. It's just beyond human comprehension. It's beyond decency.